Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is to transform complex, essential source material, the foundational research, the doctrinal publications, into the core knowledge you need to be thoroughly informed and really ready to apply these concepts.
Today, we are undertaking a really detailed exploration into what is, it's essentially the very nervous system of large-scale military operations. We're looking at how intelligence and planning harmonize at the highest operational level, the core.
Right.
And we're focusing on those crucial components, the ones people often call core enablers, the specific mechanisms, the structures, the processes that allow a core headquarters to achieve what we call decision dominance over a highly lethal and adaptive adversary.
And we have a really deep and highly relevant stack of material for this deep dive. On the foundational side, we are dissecting some key tenets from two absolutely essential publications.
Foundational is the right word.
The first is Field Manual 2.0, Intelligence, from October 2023, and the second is Field Manual 5.0, Planning and Orders Production, from November 2024. These two, they really establish the mandatory framework for how all this is supposed to integrate.
But we're not just sticking to doctrine. We're also adding some crucial historical and contemporary context. We're going to be contrasting the enduring and, frankly, painful lessons learned from the article Overreliance on Technology and Warfare, the Yom Kippur War as a Case Study.
Which is a fantastic read.
It really is. It challenges all those easy assumptions about technological superiority. And we're putting that right up against a very cutting-edge report called Adding Artificial Intelligence to the Team, which details the practical application of large language models in refining intelligence synchronization processes today.
So our mission for you, the learner, is really synthesis. We are extracting how all of these different elements, you've got rigid doctrine, you've got historical wisdom, and then this cutting-edge technology, how they synchronize at the core level to achieve necessary speed and convergence.
And I think this is the most important part. What role human analytical and ethical judgment must play in governing that speed in such a high-stakes environment.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start at the conceptual level with the intelligence warfighting function itself. Because for a lot of people, people outside the military, the word intelligence probably conjures images of spies or, secret analyses.
Sure. James Bond.
Exactly. But the doctrine makes it very clear this is far broader. It's a comprehensive warfighting function that actively drives the direction of operations.
That is the essential starting point. That's what Field Manual 2.0's intelligence really establishes from page 1.
Okay.
It defines the function not just by the branch that executes it, but by a set of 4 integrated tasks. And these have to be executed across the entire staff throughout the whole force.
Okay, so what are those 4 key tasks?
The first is providing intelligence support to force generation. The second is providing support to situational understanding. Third, and this is a big one for today, is conducting information collection. And fourth is providing intelligence support to targeting.
And what's really fascinating here is the dynamic described in the doctrine, this continuous feedback loop. It says intelligence drives the conduct of operations, and then operations in turn enable intelligence.
Exactly. That is the core concept. This is not a linear process where you get intelligence and then you act. It's a closed loop. It's a cycle. You cannot fight for information. You can't uncover what the adversary truly intends to do or where they're deployed unless you are actively conducting operations. You have to press the enemy. You have to create confusion.
And the reverse is true.
The reverse is absolutely true. You cannot conduct effective, lethal operations unless they are continually informed and updated by the intelligence you're getting from that very fight. And right in the middle of that loop, conducting information collection is explicitly defined as the critical central activity.
So how does the doctrine define that crucial collection activity? What are we actually talking about?
We're talking about the activity that synchronizes and integrates the planning and the actual employment of your sensors and assets. That's everything from a satellite to a soldier on a hilltop. And it also includes the processing, exploitation, and dissemination systems needed to make sense of all that data.
That's the whole chain.
The whole chain. It's the organized effort to seek, collect, and report information, which is then processed into usable intelligence that directly supports current and future operations.
Okay, let's get a little more granular then about the tools that are available for that collection. For a core planner, I imagine determining what you have direct control over versus what you have to ask for.
Well, that's the difference between a 1-hour decision cycle and a 6-hour one.
Or longer, yeah.
This brings us to a really crucial distinction that the doctrine draws between what it calls collection assets and collection resources. This distinction is, it's non-negotiable for understanding a corps commander's immediate capabilities, especially when you're facing the massive demands of large-scale combat. It's fundamental.
So what's the difference?
A collection asset is a system, a platform, or a capability that is officially assigned or attached to a specific commander. Crucially, this means it is directly under that commander's control for tasking, for execution, for direction. This includes the core organic assets or, say, units that are temporarily attached for a specific mission phase.
So if it's an asset, the Core Intelligence Staff Officer can just retask it immediately, based on the latest intelligence gap that's just been revealed in the middle of a fight?
Precisely. In near real time. Conversely, a collection resource is a system, a platform, or a capability that is not assigned or attached to that commander. It's typically controlled by a higher echelon, maybe the theater army, a joint force headquarters, or even a multinational partner.
So you have to ask for it.
You have to put in a request. And that request has to be prioritized and coordinated through that resource's own chain of command. This coordination, it takes time. And the request might even be denied or modified based on competing requirements across the entire theater of operations. This difference directly, fundamentally, impacts your agility.
And the coordination required to manage those organic assets and then also track all of those external requests, that falls heavily on the intelligence staff officer at the G2. They lead the staff in synchronizing all of this.
The intelligence staff officer is absolutely the linchpin. Their role is to ensure that critical information and intelligence are not just gathered, but that they are provided at the key times and locations required throughout the operation. This means continuous oversight. It's not a fire and forget kind of job.
They can't just send out the plan and hope for the best.
Not at all. They have to monitor collection and processing results constantly to assess the effectiveness of the information collection plan. If the collection results are insufficient, or maybe if the adversary does something totally unexpected, the intelligence staff officer has to initiate adjustments to the entire scheme of collection and analysis, sometimes instantly.
Now, connecting that core collection function to the modern operating environment, Field Manual 2.0 introduces a really significant formal emphasis on something called publicly available information research. Why is this explicit inclusion, this emphasis on institutional training, why is it so important right now?
Well, the importance of publicly available information research really reflects the explosion of globally accessible data. It's that simple.
Right.
We are no longer operating in a world where information collection is confined to, high-cost, highly classified systems.
It's everywhere.
It is everywhere. And the doctrinal emphasis ensures that commanders and their staffs formally account for and exploit the vast amounts of information that are publicly accessible. Things like commercial satellite imagery, non-encrypted communication data, social media, open government records. All of it can be used for planning, for decision-making, and for targeting.
So it's basically an acknowledgement that the traditional kind of stove-piped collection methods are just no longer sufficient to build a full picture of the battlefield.
That's exactly right. Publicly available information research is absolutely critical for what we call tipping and queuing. It helps you rapidly enhance your situational understanding by either confirming or, sometimes more importantly, challenging the information you've gathered through more traditional means. This research then feeds directly into what we call open source intelligence.
And the doctrine is clear that open source intelligence has to be treated just like any other intelligence capability.
Yes. It must be fully integrated into the operations process right from the very beginning. It's not an add-on. It requires training, it requires resources, and, fundamentally, it requires the commander's own understanding and guidance to be effective. You can't just have a junior soldier scrolling through social media and call it a day.
This really highlights that intelligence gathering is now, it seems, equally about having the robust technical architecture, the people, the systems, the technology to sift through and make usable the colossal amount of often unclassified information that's being generated every single second all over the globe.
The intelligence architecture is what makes it all possible. That's the word the doctrine uses. And it's the right one. It's the essential infrastructure, connecting all the different all-source, single-source, and processing, exploitation, and dissemination capabilities.
It's the nervous system.
It is the nervous system. The architecture ensures connectivity across the entire operational area, linking the core headquarters up to the theater army above and then down to the maneuver divisions below. Without that nervous system, all that raw data from publicly available information or a traditional collection just becomes useless digital noise.
And we have to remember that that infrastructure is under active attack. The doctrine recognizes that fighting for intelligence is most challenging in large-scale combat operations because the threat is actively contesting our deployments, they're leveraging lethal capabilities, and they're trying to influence our forces across multiple domains.
Absolutely. Gaining situational understanding against a peer threat that uses what we call anti-access and area denial capabilities is, well, it's an intelligence challenge of the very highest order.
Okay, so let's move up to the core then. This is the operational level headquarters that is doctrinally identified as being best positioned to achieve convergence, which is the rapid, continuous, and synchronized application of all elements of combat power. What does that actually look like when we examine the intelligence structure designed to enable it?
Well, Field Manual 2.0 confirms the core's pivotal role here. It is the echelon that must integrate joint capabilities, and by that we mean assets from the Air Force, the Navy, and allied nations. Its job is to defeat the enemy's long and mid-range fires, maintain operational tempo, and ultimately set the conditions for success for the divisions that are operating below them.
So it's a massive scope.
It is. And when the Corps serves as the Army component headquarters, it requires significant augmentation from joint and multinational forces precisely because its scope is theater-wide, not just what's happening in the close fight.
So while the divisions are focused on the immediate, lethal engagements that are happening in the next 0 to 48 hours, the Corps is worried about the deep fight. It's shaping the environment and setting the conditions for future divisions to move forward.
Exactly right. The Corps is focused on the strategic effects that are achievable within, say, the next 4 to 6 days. And to facilitate this broader, deeper understanding of the operational environment, the Corps Intelligence Cell has a very specific and sophisticated structure. It's designed to deploy and support both the main command post and any forward tactical command posts.
Okay, could you detail those 3 core sections that define the Corps Intelligence Cell's function?
Sure. The first is what we call intelligence operations. Think of this as the management hub. Its primary focus is on managing the execution of the information collection plan. So, tasking, tracking, and synchronizing every single collection platform, whether it's an organic asset or a requested resource.
They're the air traffic controllers for intelligence collection.
That is a perfect analogy. Be sure the platforms are where they need to be when they need to be there. Then you have the analytical engine of the Corps.
And what's that called?
That is the G2 analysis and control element, often just called the ACE. This is the Corps' primary analytical and all-source production element. The ACE is where all that vast amount of raw data, from publicly available information all the way up to sensitive compartmented sources, is synthesized into actionable intelligence products. They manage the flow of intelligence from collection through processing and exploitation, and then ensure it's disseminated rapidly.
And you said there were 3 sections. What about the specialized expertise?
That comes from the G2X section, which specializes in counterintelligence and human intelligence. They provide the Corps with the necessary expertise to counter the very sophisticated intelligence and deception efforts of a peer threat. They are responsible for vetting sources, conducting specific collection operations, and ensuring the security of sensitive human networks.
And there's one more piece to this, right? The weather.
You can't forget the weather. We have to mention the crucial support provided by a United States Air Force-provided staff weather officer, or a staff weather team. They analyze how weather and even space weather can impact the performance of collection platforms and the movement of both friendly and threat forces across the entire area of operations.
Analyzing the operational environment at this scale must mean the intelligence staff is simultaneously operating across wildly different timelines. How does the doctrine help structure that analytical effort across multiple time windows?
It does, and that's a key point. Field Manual 2.0 specifically provides a framework for these analytical time windows, and it's designed to ensure the staff focuses their limited cognitive energy correctly. In the near-term window, which is current to 48 hours, the focus is highly tactical and immediate.
So what's happening right now?
Right now and tomorrow. This involves pre-mission analysis for current Corps forces, detailed intelligence preparation of the operational environment updates, situation development, which means real-time tracking of known enemy forces, and all the collection management required for immediate action.
And how does that focus shift when the Corps looks further out into the deep fight?
When you look at the mid-range window, which extends from 48 hours out to 5 days, the focus shifts to the operational level. The analysis is now focused on identifying and tracking groups of high-payoff targets.
Such as?
Things like long-range fires, missile artillery, rockets, and specialty ground forces that pose a threat to the deep area. This time frame emphasizes really critical analytical tasks like defining target nominations, validating those targets for engagement, and then conducting comprehensive battle damage assessments to confirm whether operational objectives were actually met. The Corps is setting the stage for success 2 to 5 days in the future.
And to manage this massive collection requirement across these timelines, the Corps has to rely on unique organizational enablers to fill collection gaps. One of these is the Expeditionary Military Intelligence Brigade.
The Expeditionary Military Intelligence Brigade is key because it gives the Corps commander flexibility. It's a powerful tool. It can augment existing intelligence capabilities, or it can be used to rapidly cover critical gaps in the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance coverage across both Corps and division operational requirements.
So it's a surge capability.
In a way, yes. Given the scale of large-scale combat operations, the Expeditionary Military Intelligence Brigade is absolutely essential for addressing the continuous requirement for intelligence collection that the organic staff simply cannot fulfill on its own.
And the intelligence architecture itself, which we discussed earlier, becomes the critical glue here. It connects those organic capabilities, the joint ones, and this Expeditionary Military Intelligence Brigade. The doctrine uses two specific concepts to describe how this connection works: intelligence reach and intelligence overwatch.
Right. And they're different but related. Intelligence reach is the collaborative process that ensures the Corps isn't operating in a silo. It guarantees continuous communication and coordination among strategic, operational, and tactical intelligence organizations. So this means the Corps intelligence officer can pull information and expertise from national agencies or from the theater army.
And intelligence overwatch, that sounds more like a dedicated protective function.
It is. That's a good way to think about it. Intelligence Overwatch creates standing, fixed analytical capabilities. And these are often situated in the continental United States or another sanctuary area far away from the immediate fight.
So they're safe from attack.
Exactly. Their mission is to provide dedicated, sustained analytical support to committed maneuver units. Their specialty is not generating raw data. Their job is to distill the overwhelming volume of data collected by the entire architecture and extract concise, actionable answers for the maneuver commander who is under fire.
So when the Corps is fighting through a highly contested, denied, degraded, and disrupted communication environment, Overwatch is the insurance policy. It makes sure the maneuver units get the 3 key facts they need, not 3 gigabytes of raw sensor data they can't possibly use.
Precisely. It's an endurance measure. It's designed to protect the commander's decision-making by ensuring the most critical intelligence can cut through the fog and the electronic noise of the fight.
Okay, so a sophisticated intelligence structure like that must be put to work through an effective, integrated planning methodology. A successful information collection plan isn't generated in a vacuum, right? It's driven entirely by the commander's priority intelligence requirements.
That's right.
And the mechanism for developing and testing all of this is the military decision-making process.
The military decision-making process, as it's detailed in Field Manual 5.0, Planning and Orders Production, is the engine. It's the iterative methodology the staff uses to understand the situation, develop viable courses of action, and then ultimately produce the plan or order. And crucially, information collection is not a separate step. It is integrated throughout the entire process from start to finish.
So let's look at where the intelligence staff really begins to shape this. I assume that starts in step 2, mission analysis, where they identify those critical gaps in knowledge.
Absolutely. During mission analysis, the intelligence staff conducts what's called intelligence preparation of the operational environment. This is where they systematically define the operating environment, determine its effects on all forces, evaluate the adversary, and then forecast possible adversary courses of action.
And that's where the gaps appear.
That's where the gaps become glaringly obvious. This rigorous analysis exposes what you don't know. And these knowledge gaps guide the commander to establish the initial commander's critical information requirements, which is what the commander absolutely must know to make a decision, and specifically the priority intelligence requirements, which are the intelligence components of those broader requirements.
So the priority intelligence requirement is basically the intelligence staff's focused instruction set, directing those scarce assets to go and close the most critical gaps.
It is the ultimate focusing mechanism for all collection. The priority intelligence requirement is defined as the intelligence component of the commander's critical information requirements. And it's used to focus the employment of limited intelligence assets and resources against all the competing demands for intelligence support.
And it's not just about the enemy.
No, and that's a very important point. Field Manual 5.0 mandates that intelligence regarding civil considerations, like the location of displaced persons, damage to critical infrastructure, or political sentiment in the area, can be just as critical for mission success as information about the enemy's main maneuver units.
Okay, so once those priority intelligence requirements are established, the staff develops the initial information collection plan. What are the key practical considerations the staff has to include in this draft plan? It must be incredibly complex.
It is. The initial plan, as outlined in Field Manual 5.0, has to address several complex factors all at once. First, the staff must establish a clear prioritization of all the commander's critical information requirements, knowing that if one is satisfied, the focus instantly shifts to the next one on the list.
And then there's the logistics of it.
Huge logistical considerations. They have to consider the sustainment required for collection assets. How long can an aircraft fly? What are its maintenance requirements? They also have to account for weather contingencies that might limit visibility or platform performance, and even legal support requirements, which are necessary for many technical or human intelligence operations.
And for assets on the ground, getting them in and out.
Absolutely. Crucially, they must detail the secure insertion and extraction methods for reconnaissance, security, surveillance, and human intelligence collection assets that are operating deep in contested areas.
The synchronization of that plan, where it really becomes operational, happens in step 4 of the military decision-making process, wargaming. This is where that action-reaction counteraction cycle plays out against a projected adversary.
Wargaming is, I would argue, the most vital step for the intelligence staff. It's their opportunity to fully develop and synchronize the information collection plan with both the detailed scheme of maneuver and the scheme of fires. It's where the plan is tested against a thinking enemy.
How does that work in practice?
During the war game, the staff rigorously applies the collection synchronization matrix, which is the specific schedule of tasking. They identify exactly which asset will be looking at which named area of interest, at what time, and for which specific indicator. This test allows them to refine what's called the decision support template, which graphically depicts decision points, timelines, and the intelligence required to trigger specific actions in a course of action.
So if the war game reveals say, a 4-hour gap in your coverage over a critical river crossing site, that's where the intelligence staff has to adjust the plan. Maybe they task a joint resource to fill that specific gap.
Exactly. Or they analyze the impact of projected adversary actions on their own collection efforts. If the enemy destroys a key satellite uplink, do they have a redundant sensor ready to take over? They must ensure continuous, overlapping coverage to answer those priority intelligence requirements.
This level of detail requires incredible, seamless coordination between the intelligence staff and the operations staff, the G2 and the G3.
It is absolutely mandated collaboration. The information collection effort is explicitly defined as a combined intelligence and operations activity by both Field Manual 2.0 and Field Manual 5.0. And probably the most tangible example of this collaboration is the concept of the intelligence handover line. It's a control measure used to manage continuous collection responsibility.
Okay, give us a detailed example of the intelligence handover line in a core operation. What are the practical complexities involved in something like that?
Okay, let's use the deep fight scenario. The Core G2 anticipates that a high payoff target, let's say it's a heavy armored brigade, is moving from the Core's deep operational area into the subordinate division's area of operation. And they project that this transition is going to happen in approximately 36 hours.
So a clock is ticking.
A clock is ticking, and it requires immediate coordination. The Corps Intelligence Officer, having tracked this unit with a high-altitude platform, now has to work with the Corps Operations Officer and also with the subordinate division's operations and intelligence officers to establish an intelligence handover line on the map.
So the handover line is essentially a demarcation point, a line on the map where one unit formally transfers its primary collection responsibility to the next.
Precisely. Let's say the Theater Army is conducting high-fidelity unmanned aircraft system collection for the Corps. The intelligence handover line dictates that when that target crosses that invisible control measure, the division intelligence officer immediately assumes responsibility for tracking it, either using their own organic assets or maybe lower-flying, more responsive platforms.
And the goal is to make sure the target is never lost during that handoff.
That is the entire point, to ensure the target is never lost during the transition of forces and control measures. Because if communication is disrupted at that critical moment, the entire scheme of fires could be delayed or misdirected. That's why the planning has to be so layered and so tightly synchronized.
This demand for continuous, complex synchronization, especially when battle conditions are fluid, it just requires incredible speed and accuracy from the staff. Manually updating a complex schedule like the information collection synchronization matrix based on a constantly moving threat must be a massive undertaking.
It is. It's incredibly labor-intensive.
And this is where the concept of technological assistance comes in, which is detailed in our contemporary source, adding artificial intelligence to the team.
This report offers a fantastic, really practical look at how artificial intelligence is being tested in operational planning today. The authors discussed their team's use of a Department of Defense large language model, specifically one called NIPR-GPT, to refine and manage their information collection synchronization matrix.
So, what was the core problem they were trying to solve by introducing this new tool? What was broken?
Well, the primary motivation was operational efficiency and reducing human cognitive overload on what are essentially mechanical tasks. The traditional process of updating the information collection synchronization matrix, which again involves scheduling dozens of collection assets against dozens of named areas of interest across specific time windows, was highly prone to human error.
I can imagine.
It consumed valuable analytical hours and created significant stress for the planning staff. By using the large language model, they reduced a time-consuming, hour-long manual process into a task that took mere minutes, and it virtually eliminated transcription and synchronization errors.
That level of acceleration is remarkable. How did the staff practically interface with the large language model to achieve that kind of efficiency gain?
They used a simple iterative prompting method. They started by clearly stating the product's intent. They told it they needed a detailed time-based collection synchronization spreadsheet. Then they fed the model some basic parameters, like the specific 24-hour period they were planning for and the names of 4 collection assets.
And they could refine it from there.
Exactly. They refined the layout with follow-up prompts, requesting the large language model to, for example, swap columns and rows to orient the time windows horizontally and the assets vertically, which was the layout the staff preferred.
And then they introduced the actual intelligence requirements into the model.
That's the next step. They fed the large language model specific lists of 20 named areas of interest, target 001 through target 02A, along with specific rules and collection requirements for each asset. The model processed all this information and generated a prioritized information collection synchronization matrix, which was ready to be copied and pasted right into a spreadsheet.
That's amazing.
It gets better. Beyond just generating it, the model could then immediately summarize the total collection time dedicated to each named area of interest and calculate the utilization rate for each asset, giving the staff these rapid assessment capabilities they never had before.
This clearly demonstrates the model's value as an assistant for, mechanical synchronization. But the report is very careful to immediately point out the critical limitations. The large language model is not the right tool for every single task.
And these limitations are non-negotiable. They reinforce the absolute need for human validation. The authors found the large language model was, frankly, unreliable when they asked it to source direct quotes from Doctrine or gather specific equipment specifications.
Why is that?
Because the model generates responses based on a massive training survey of texts. It's extrapolating what a source would say, rather than having a direct connection to what the published source actually did say. Furthermore, as a contained Department of Defense model, it is not connected to the current internet, meaning it cannot provide up-to-the-minute situational information.
So it's a powerful tool, but it has its limits.
It's a powerful formatter and synchronizer, but it cannot, and it absolutely should not, replace the human analyst's role in critical thinking.
And this brings us squarely back to the human element and the importance of judgment, especially when you're facing an adaptive adversary. Our second article, Overreliance on Technology in Warfare, offers a really necessary historical warning against this kind of technological complacency.
The Yom Kippur War remains an incredibly potent case study. The article reminds us of an enduring truth. While technology, whether we're talking about the longbow during the 100 Years' War or the promises of advanced network-centric warfare today, is a critical factor, it fundamentally does not change the core, enduring nature of war itself.
The danger, as highlighted by the Israeli Defense Forces experience prior to 1973, is that this reliance on perceived superiority can breed complacency and a failure to prepare for the unexpected.
Absolutely. Having secured these massive, rapid victories in prior conflicts, the Israeli Defense Force had developed a really dangerous sense of invincibility. They relied too heavily on the assumption of their superior armor and air power, and this led to a major intelligence failure, a strategic surprise that initiated the war.
So their technology blinded them.
In a way, yes. This technological arrogance caused them to impart too great an importance to the technology of war and insufficient importance to what Clausewitz famously referred to as the moral dimensions.
The moral dimensions, meaning the intangibles. Things like political motivation, the human will to fight, the element of surprise, the effectiveness of deception.
Precisely, all the human factors. The source notes that ultimately the tide of that conflict was swayed not by some sudden technological leap, but by the Israeli attention to these intangibles, the deep motivation of their multi-generational fighting force, and the flexibility of their command structure compared to the initial rigidity shown by their adversaries.
So the lesson for the contemporary corps planner is what?
It's critical. The lesson is that artificial intelligence can accelerate the science of planning by producing a matrix in minutes, but only human judgment, critical thinking, and disciplined ethical reasoning can define the correct priority intelligence requirements and anticipate the unpredictable moral dimension of the adversary.
And that link back to the foundation is so crucial because Field Manual 5.0 mandates that the staff must use ethical reasoning, the deliberate evaluation of whether decisions and actions conform to accepted standards of conduct, as a core component of critical and creative thinking during the military decision-making process.
Right.
So the speed of the machine only matters if the human operator has done the rigorous analysis to ensure the input, the intent, and the outcome are strategically sound and ethically defensible.
Speed for speed's sake, without that human critical overlay, just risks accelerating a fundamentally flawed plan.
So bringing all these threads together, what does this entire deep dive mean for the corps planner who is facing the enormous challenge of large-scale combat operations today?
I think it means that the Corps must fundamentally master synchronization. This involves coordinating its organic collection assets, attached units like the Expeditionary Military Intelligence Brigade, and joint collection resources, all while operating in a denied, degraded, and disrupted communications environment. It's a huge challenge. The sophisticated intelligence architecture is the indispensable nervous system, transmitting all the necessary data, but the commander's intent, articulated through clear prioritization, the commander's critical information requirements, and the priority intelligence requirements, that must always remain the brain, governing the entire process.
We've seen this compelling push for radical efficiency through modern tools like large language models, which can handle the mechanical tasks of updating that critical information collection synchronization matrix in just minutes, freeing up valuable staff time.
And while that speed is undeniably vital for maintaining tempo, that speed is meaningless without the bedrock of critical human analysis and the wisdom to avoid the historical complacency that technology so often introduces. As Field Manual 2.0 warns, fighting for intelligence is most challenging in modern conflicts, where the adversary is actively working to disrupt and influence friendly forces. The large language model cannot determine the adversary's most dangerous course of action. It will only format the collection plan once you have determined the requirement through rigorous, disciplined, human critical thinking during the military decision-making process.
The ultimate synthesis here, then, seems to be that the future of corps planning demands embracing the efficiency of technology for the science of war, the technical synchronization, the scheduling, the movement tables, but ensuring that we save the irreplaceable human capacity for the art of war.
The art of war.
The ethical reasoning, the analysis of intent, and anticipating the moral dimensions of conflict that ultimately define victory or defeat.
We have to use every tool available to gain an advantage, but we must never allow the tool to dictate our fundamental strategic or ethical judgment.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to explore as you consider the role of the corps headquarters. If artificial intelligence can generate a near-perfect information collection synchronization matrix in minutes, does that acceleration change the necessary tempo of the entire military? The understanding of the moral dimension create a permanent, unavoidable speed bump that defines the ultimate sustainable pace of war.
Something to ponder as you reflect on the complexities of achieving convergence and decision dominance in the complex operational environment.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.